And good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Shed Adventures. And this week, as you can see, we're back in the shed, and I have a cup of tea on the go. And we've moved on in terms of the whole dunking debate, which has caused much mirth and merriment. And I'm glad that most people didn't take it too seriously. Ginger nuts. This, we think, may be the answer, because while the old digestives, and we think one of our viewers has found the reason: reduced palm oil, which is a great thing. But perhaps ginger nuts are taking over. Anyway, enough of that before I rudely can't talk because my mouth's full. What are we going to talk about today? Well, I promised that we'd be talking about tents or canoes. You can't see what the weather's like, but those of us that have been living in the UK will know that it's just been wet and windy and miserable. And a couple of people have asked me about some of the equipment we used on our Antarctic expeditions. And I thought I'd have a quick look at it and see what I had. And I've opened up various blue barrels and store cupboards around here. You want to be very glad this is not smelly vision, because I'm going to have to put a lot of this through the wash. It's clearly got all a bit damp and wet and manky in there. But what I thought is I would show you 40 years later. So here is the expedition book. Other expedition books are available, but I think Antarctic Year, Brabant Island Expedition, written by Commander Chris Firth and forward by HRH Prince Charles. Now, of course, our king. He was our patron for the expedition. Yeah, I think you'll find that on Amazon. Quite rare. This one, nicely, is signed by Chris himself, and Chris has since sadly passed away, and he's drawn a lovely little penguin and signed my book for me. So this must have been my original one. But back here, and I've now lost the place, there is I was going to say famous, not really famous. There's a picture of me. I think you can see that. Can you see that? Yeah. I'll put this on properly. There's a picture of me laid out there with all my equipment. And that started me thinking, because I looked at that picture and I went, what a pack of lies, really. Because I then got on the web and I looked around, and everyone has these, what do I carry in my rucksack? What do I take on a trip with? And I look at this vast array of stuff and I think, are you really dragging all of that around? So what I thought is we'd have a look at the picture, and then I'd probably tell you the truth, because there is a slightly amusing story. I find it amusing, or the guy, a gentleman on the expedition, still talks to me about it. I fell down a crevasse one trip, all very frightening, but that's another story. And I gave my rucksack onto a rope that was passed down to me to be taken up because it was causing me problems in trying to get out. And the gentleman went to give this, what he thought would be a huge heavy rucksack, a big pull, and he did that, and the thing, in the story goes, literally flew out the hole because he couldn't believe how little it weighed. And he's quite right. By the end of the expedition, I had worked out exactly what you needed to travel in the Antarctic, and you needed to keep the weight down. So I thought I would run through some of the things, and I'll show you the picture later. I'll photograph it and get it on the on this video somehow. I thought I'd show you some of the things. The first thing I'm going to show you isn't quite as interesting as it used to be, but this is what's known as a Norgie, Norwegian Army shirt. 40 years ago, this was cutting edge. Norwegian Army had them issued. They then, I think they're still issued now to the British Army, or they were in the late 90s. So a Norgie shirt, but this is the one I wore for a year, and you can't really see, but it's completely and utterly threadbare. There's holes. I don't know if you can see the light through it. Maybe you can. But I took this off after wearing it for a year, and put it into a black plastic bag on the flight deck of HMS HMS Endurance, the Navy's ice patrol ship. And the next time I saw that black plastic bag was back in the UK, and it had a knot tied into it, and it hadn't been cleaned or done anything. So I had this shirt that I'd worn for a year, and it hadn't been cleaned. And I was doing lectures, little lecture tours to schools and the WI and the round table and that sort of thing, low level stuff. So what I did was I got this shirt and I stuck it in a poly bag, uncleaned, and I used to bring it out during my lecture tour and say to people, here's the shirt I wore for a year in my poly bag. They go, oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, and I haven't washed it since. Would you like would you like me to get it out? Well, it always caused a bit of a giggle. Anyway, so that's pretty much my first layer. Norwegian Army shirt. First generation fleece, although the fleece has actually worn off in most of the places. And that was about as good as it got. So we were issued this beautiful thing. This is Mountain Equipment Ceratore duvet. Quite new in those days, Thinsulate. So that's a man-made fibre, basically hollow fibres, so not down. So it didn't struggle if it got wet. And again, what they call a Cordura, which is a version of Gore-Tex. Gore-Tex had just started to come out. I didn't have anything that was Gore-Tex, but well, we had this. But it was huge. You can see, fabulous thing. And I've kept it for 40 years, and you can see it hasn't been used much. Great at base camp. But you're not going to ski with this. You're not going to drag this on a sledging party around the Antarctic. It's too, when you're moving, it's too warm. And when you're stood still, you're normally doing something, digging a hole, digging a snow cave, putting a tent up. And once you put a tent up or you've dug your snow cave, you get in and you get into your sleeping bag. So this, as much as I would have told people it got carried, certainly if it was supplied by a sponsor, I would. That never went anywhere. If you look closely at the picture, you will actually see this silver compass, this actual one. So I keep this, still good, battle damaged. I used this right through my military career. So this is an old friend, but I have to have a silver compass. Green Army torch was carried with some spare batteries. I didn't during the summer. Pretty much light all the time, so you didn't need that, but during the winter we did. Everyone's going to go, head torch. Head torches were available, but they weren't like the things you had today. You ended up with a power pack on your belt and a long wire and a battery, actually no better than the and a bulb, no better than the bulb in this. So they weren't as developed as they are today. So people still carried a torch. You will see a Siloam, the old light stick. Again, they were fairly new in those days. You snap that, the two chemicals meet and you get a light. Quite useful in an emergency situation. We've spoken about these before, the old ship's lifeboat matches, and I did carry some of these. Never use them on a day-to-day basis because you had a little pack of matches in your army compo rations, or Marine Arctic rations that did the job just as well. But carried those just in case. I think we would have seen this on I can see this on the picture. This is on my rucksack. So this wasn't issue, this is mine. My Don Willans, again, first generation ice climbing tool with the angled pick. Carried this mainly, got the hammer. When you're skidooing or polking, pulling sledges across, buckles give way, things give way. And if you had some spares, you could mend things, bend back crampons and stuff with that hammer. So I carried that not only as an ice climbing tool, but also as a mending tool. You've seen these before, I think, on another trip. These are my actual actual Antarctic foot fang. These were cutting edge at the time, as again they're well out of fashion now. But you'll see these bolted on top of my rucksack in the picture. Red socks. Well, everyone, ubiquitous red socks. I carried a pair of these, not as spare socks. You kept your socks on, and I think I changed my socks a couple of times during the year. I always used to have 2 pairs of socks on, but I carried these. Why? Because in an emergency, you've got a spare glove. In a real emergency, you can actually get this on your head, and you've got a spare hat. So I carried a spare pair of socks instead of carrying spare gloves. Dachsteins, you've heard me wax lyrical about the old Dachs. These were the go-to gloves. Had those most of the trip. We're also issued lovely Royal Marine gloves. Again, this is post-Falkland stuff. They realised that the army nylon gloves were rubbish, so they gave the Marines, and we could obviously get them through the stores, a nice insulated glove with a finger for your trigger if you want to go shooting people, with an outer that's made of Gore-Tex. And I did use these, mainly just the outer. Very good skiing on a warmish day. So they got used. And this is interesting. You'll see this on the photograph when I show it. This is a blown, destroyed tent. So I made this sitting in a tent, sewing it up. And it's in a double bag. This is how precious it was. This is my diary. So there's 2 diaries, I think, in here. That one is for our Smith Island expedition. Joint Services Expedition 1994-95. And there's a few stories in there. But this is the big one. This is the nearly 12 months in the Antarctic. And I had a Polaroid camera. Look at that. So these were real pictures taken at the time and printed off on the Polaroid camera and actually stuck in the diary as I went along. And there is a map of the island. So that is the full size map. So what's that? A4 size. The island probably sort of more on a scale of the Isle of Wight. So you can imagine trying to navigate around that island with all the crevasses and the seracs and everything else, with 100-metre contour lines. And I'm obviously used to the British Ordnance Survey map, which is just fantastic. So navigating on that island was an absolute nightmare. And in here, it's quite embarrassing to read sometimes. Are all my thoughts day to day on what we got up to. Most fantastic day, clear sky, hardly a breath of wind. Woke at 0600, could not sleep, so that'd be the summer. Made breakfast, decided to take our skis up with us. To my surprise, we got away by 0913 hours and started to plod up first easy quarter mile of ridge. It was great just to be out in a small party doing a lovely climb. Oh, okay, we're climbing Mount Hunter that day. Very good day, enjoyed it. Grade 2, no, easy climb, very good. But there's some heartfelt, dark days in there when things weren't going quite so well. So that exists, and you'll see that on the picture. Carry mat. I'm still a fan of carry mats. Everyone's going to go for the blow up bed, but I still love the old carry mat. Still use that today. Now these are interesting. These are Royal Marine. Oh, these smell. So these are Royal Marine issue, and what they do, they come with a sort of padded, insulated sock, big sock, and the sock goes in there, and these goes on top. These are also insulated. I used to wear these a lot when I was working on my skidoo. So if you see me skidooing in any pictures, you'll normally see these on my feet. And I used to keep the plastic boot, leave the plastic boot out of behind, put the inner plastic boot on, or the inner leather part of the mountaineering boot, and then slot that in here and have these over the top done up nice and tight, and you'd have in the bottom is actually a lump of carry mat. There you go. So you'd have a lovely insulated warm foot that you could plod around in, and it didn't do you any harm in the soft snow to have a bit of a Yeti size boot. Supposedly you'll see people claiming they carried these. This is a Royal Marine thermos flask, so not only is the thermos flask insulated, the insulated thermos flask then goes into an insulated box. Brabant Island, Antarctic, you can see that. Should have a cup. Yes, the cup's stuck in the top. That's all nice and clean. Carried it for a while, and then you go, really, that full of water. Now, staying hydrated is really important in any cold climate. If you stay hydrated, theoretically, you won't get frostbite, is the theory. But that's consuming 8 pints of water a day. We had a doctor, an expedition doctor, who was an expert in cold weather survival and cold weather stuff, and he never had hot tea. He had tepid water, and his research proved that while there's a big psychological thing, a lovely hot cup of tea, the reality is, for the time and the amount of fuel it took, remember, in the Antarctic, when you're having to get your water from snow or ice, if it's snow, 7 pans of snow equal 1 pan of water at the end. So you're melting water to get one, in a tent with 3 of you, you want 3 pints of water for a brew. So you've got your pan on the stove, and as the water melts, you're just piling in. Ice is great because it's got more density to it, but if it's snow, 7 times you're loading that just to get yourself the same equivalent of water. And that's a lot of food and fuel, a lot of fuel that you've got to carry. So his view was just warm it up to tepid water, and that will actually do. It will hide, not good for the head, not good for the psychology, but in terms of you're not dragging more and more fuel around just to melt water, it was a good way to go ahead. So he just drank tepid water. Sleeping bags. So the army had problems again. The Falklands was a watershed moment for army equipment when they really realised that what they had wasn't suitable. So this looked like the sleeping bag that we're currently issued. It's actually not. This was a trial bag issued by the Army Trials Unit. Huge thing. Green maggot. It does come in a compression sack, but I never use it. So this is what I carried. I carried this, whatever I was doing. I was never cold in this. Whoop. I was never cold in this. I kept it in a Gore-Tex bivy bag as well, just in case anything ever happened to the tent. All we need to do an emergency bivy. So it just lived inside its Gore-Tex bivy bag for the year. And in the morning, I would just stuff that into my big green Army Crusader rucksack. Never packed it away, never tried to put it in its stuff sack. We also got issued, and in the summer, I used this one. So this is an ancient. This is a Phoenix Mountaineering. Don't know what the name is. Gold Flash maybe or something. Very good. Again, this was not down, but adequate. Gold Flash. Okay, made in Great Britain. Phoenix Mountaineering, which I still think are going. I think that's still their. I think that's still their colours actually. That dark brown. Yeah, didn't use it much. Maybe in the summer, around base camp. I do remember in the winter around base camp when weight didn't matter. I did sometimes put that inside that. Wow, you were roasty toasty. I think that's it. So what I'll do is I'll now flash up the photograph you've seen some of the stuff, and we'll take you through it.
So let's have a quick look at this photograph and see what we can see and what did I actually carry. So let's just take away the big bits that really were a team piece of kit that went in your Polk. So the stove, take that off, that never went in that rucksack. I never carried that on a daily basis. That went straight in the Polk. The billies next to that, that went in the Polk. The fuel bottle, that went in the Polk. The spade that you can see on the side of my rucksack tucked inside the outside pocket, that went in the Polk. There's a set of snowshoes on the outside of the rucksack. They were completely useless. They stayed in the box and never carried those. And then all the spare clothing you can see over on the left. There's a face mask. I don't think anyone ever used their face mask, even during the winter. There's a pair of tent boots in there. They never went out anywhere. 4 candles for people who love their their comedy, and the famous 4 candles sketch from the Two Ronnies. What we did take, or what I used every day, you can see my toothbrush and toothpaste there. Absolutely critical. We didn't wash for close on a year at all, anywhere. The only thing I wash on a daily basis was my teeth, because when you're consuming Royal Marine Arctic rations, 5,500 calories a day, the big part of that is sweets, chocolate, sugar, etc., to get the calorie count up. So while the rest of us was left el natural for 12 months, our teeth, I would clean those twice a day. I can see an altimeter there. I did occasionally carry that. I can see my compass there. Always carried that. There you can see the map. You can also see in front of the map a little device. That's called a PEEPS. That's an avalanche detector. You switch it on, and in theory, if you're lost in an avalanche, you can, and other people have one, you can switch it from send to receive, and try and find their signal underneath the snow. I don't think it worked at all very well. And then the other thing of interest, if you look by my carry mat, you can see a plastic bottle. What was that all about? Well, we did a scientific study on cold diuresis, which is this idea that on cold days you tend to urinate more, which you do, which is the body thickening up the blood by making you urinate. And we wanted to do a study, although our doctor did, to work out over an extended period whether you stopped this urination and actually acclimatized, and the answer is you did. But everyone carried on carrying their pee bottle and peeing into their pee bottle because it made a lot of sense when you're in a tent buried in the snow, or when it's hooly outside. Nobody wanted to leave the tent and go outside for number one, so you did it in your bottle and kept that in the porch of the tent. So you can see that pretty much that rucksack was made up of that big sleeping bag, carry mat, ice climbing tools, a few, my diary that you can see there, the snow brush, which you can see next to the thermos flask, where the snow brush and the little sponge lived in the tent in the little pocket. I never carried a thermos flask after the first few trips, far too heavy. So probably half the weight of what you can see there was never genuinely carried in your rucksack. A lot of the big items went in the tent. So I hope you enjoyed that run through some of the things we carried, and the picture that paints a rather, well, in my case, false picture of all the things supposedly I manly dragged or carried around the island. A lot of that stuff was team stuff that went in the Polk stroke sledge that we pulled, rather than in that rucksack as showed in the picture. When you're dragging lots of stuff, you want to keep the weight down to a minimum. And I soon discovered after the first few trips that I needed relatively little spare kit. Never go anywhere without a shovel, because you've got a shovel in the Antarctic. You've always, or anywhere with snow, Norway or anywhere, you've always got safety in terms of being able to dig yourself in, make yourself a snow hole or an igloo or something. Apart from that,
Food was my biggest worry. Food and the stove and fuel. If you had that, you were a happy chap. And don't lose your gloves. Don't drop anything. And look after your feet. All those good things they taught you in the army. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. If so, please like and subscribe. And we got some good weather coming up, I can see. So hopefully we'll get back onto tents and canoes. Anyway, hopefully you've all had a nice bank holiday weekend. And it's the coronation next weekend, so we'll look forward to that.